I mustn't cry before it starts. But before it starts, guess what you have to do? Turn off your cell phones. So I'm Suzanne Taylor, and welcome. This is not your official welcome. That will be at 11:30, so we'll go over other things. This is your pre-treat. And what a treat this is for me. You know, you all know what's going on or you wouldn't be here. We've already gotten the word out in the last 2 days of how this thing got, well, 2 weeks ago we recreated the event, and then 2 days ago we had to recreate the live stream. So I don't think any of you wandered in and don't know the data, so we're not going to dwell on that. I'm just going to presume you know the spot that we're in. And one of the wonderful things about this whole situation, and it is, I want to say it is wonderful, it has wonderful aspects to it, is that some incredible people have found each other. And a lot of them have found each other because of this guy. Craig Weiler, I would think also, since you've come early to hear him, most of you already know his absolutely fabulous work. He has a wonderful blog. He'll tell you about his blog. And this issue is bigger than TED. And Craig is going to really tell you about the meta issue that TED has given us the opportunity to dialogue about, a real focus on an issue that really is hurting us all in terms of our evolution, in terms of our progress. So here we are with a fabulous stage that inadvertently TED gave us. And so I'm just going to turn this over to Craig, and he's going to recap for you whatever there is that leads to this place that we're at, where we're all in the potential for a huge step for humanity just out of this little beginning. So, Craig Weiler, you're on.
Thank you. When I was preparing for this speech, I kept having people ask me, are you going to be doing any TED bashing? This was important to them because liability concerns and stuff. And that got me to thinking I was going to do a whole recap, but that's not really the issue. This isn't about TED. This is about us. And what I want to do is bring you my experience in research from learning about the culture of what's happening, share this with you, and help you understand the whole picture. Now, you might think that this might have been starting about 5, 10, 20 years ago, but this movement actually began, wait for it, 140 years ago. It's been that long. This started with the Society for Psychical Research in England. They began with some of the luminaries of that time. We're talking very educated, very prestigious people began investigating psychic mediums of the time to find out whether there was anything to it. Right behind them came the skeptics, who ignored all of the research and simply began ridiculing them and attacking everything that they were doing. And that's where it starts. Over the intervening years, they continued to do research. The skeptics always came right behind them and attacked it until we got to J.B. Rhine in the 1950s. And what he did was he took the psychical research that was happening and he brought it into the lab. Some of you may have heard of Zener cards. Those are like 5 different cards with different symbols on them that he was using to help understand psychic ability and do methodologic testing on it. He had extremely significant results from it. He was the first one to use meta-analysis and statistics to understand the results that he was getting. And right behind him came the skeptics, trashing everything he did, attempting to ruin his reputation. And he also had one of the researchers that was working with him that faked some results. And of course, this was a huge disaster. And as far as the skeptics were concerned, if you had one person, even though J.B. Rhine outed the guy, nevertheless, the skeptics jumped on this and used it as a reason to trash all the existing research. So then we move forward from there, and now we start to see organized skepticism. This began with the Committee for Skeptical Investigations. And this was an organization, actually it was called, CSICOP, Committee for Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal. Right from the start, they were enmeshed in controversy. Their first bit of research that they did ended with a great deal of cover-up and backstabbing, and they ended up having the moderates split from the organization. Fast forward a little bit, and now we have the magician James Randi, who forms the James Randi Educational Foundation, or as we call it, JREF. And he started a $1 million challenge for psychics, basically to ridicule them. At least that's the opinion of the people who are critical of the challenge, including myself. To us, it seems like something like a fundamentalist church creating all the rules and then creating all the rules, completely controlling the challenge, and then saying, well, go ahead, convince us that evolution exists. And finally, a few years ago, they actually admitted that it's a publicity stunt. So all of this stuff has been happening over the years, and as psychical research has gone forward, it's had to bite and claw its way every step of the way. Parapsychological researchers today recommend that students get tenure first before they even attempt to move into parapsychological studies, because they can ruin their careers by even broaching the subject first. Brian Josephson, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, was disinvited to a conference for his interest and outspoken advocacy of parapsychology. And because I'm a blogger, I hear stuff on the side of people having their studies and whatnot not get published because the mainstream won't accept it. And this is kind of the state of affairs that I walked into when I started investigating parapsychology about 5 years ago. This is an enormously difficult field to research because every single positive element you can find has skepticism attached. And when you first start researching this, you have no idea what's real and what isn't. Certainly, Wikipedia is no help at all. If anybody's gone on there and looked for parapsychological research, it really doesn't provide you with anything substantial in terms of, well, you know, the truth. The reason for that is that skeptics have band together. There's something called guerrilla skepticism. Basically, it's a bunch of obsessive people working on these Wikipedia pages to rewrite them constantly to have a skeptical outlook. And then they refer back to the skeptic's dictionary, which voices the same opinion. So when you look through these Wikipedia articles and you go back, you find all these resources created by and for skeptics. It's an interesting situation, and one of the things you can take from that is they have been getting a whole lot more frantic lately, and way more so in the last 5 years. This has been a real interesting thing because the psychical community, unlike the skeptics, took time to build. People first needed the data, and that data had to get online where everybody could find it. And 5 years ago, there was very little, and now you can find it every place. There are PDF files of studies that you can find online virtually at your fingertips now. People are sharing this information all the time in the comment sections of places like the Huffington Post and local newspapers. And anytime the parapsychological stuff comes up, you now have supporters and skeptics going at each other. But the supporters have so much more data on their side than they used to. And that's all because this information has slowly come forward on the internet. On my blog, what I've tried to do is when this information has become available, to write it up and then present in an easy format the scientific evidence. I mean, most of you probably don't know, but there's an experiment called the Ganzfeld that's been going on for about 30 years. It was started by Charles Honorton, and of course, a skeptic right by his side, Ray Hyman, questioning every single bit of it. Well, what about fingerprints on the, you know, it gets really imaginative and creative on the skeptic side as to what they think might possibly go wrong. But anyway, these experiments have been going on for about 30 years, and the results are certainly credible by any sane scientific standard. Telepathy has been scientifically proven to exist, but you would never know that from the mainstream. However, we have the internet now, and this information is coming around the edges. And as I was saying, I'm trying to pull this information together on my blog and present it in a form that anybody can look at and read. And you can link to the studies now so people can go back to primary sources and see, yes, this is real. As people have been sharing this information, something interesting has happened that I've never seen before, which is it seems like the world's intellectual elite has grabbed onto this, and they are starting to push it forward. On the internet, they can be a little bit anonymous, which allows them to argue without fear for their position. And this is where we finally get to TED, because the story wasn't about TED and Ted's response, because in my opinion, this was typical skeptical stuff. You could see it all the time. It's, you know, there's this whole history of this type of behavior. But what was so different about it when they took down the Rupert Sheldrake video was that the proponent side was really prepared and ready to do battle intellectually. And they absolutely pushed that home. I have, in the past, 5 years ago, I would get on a comment thread and I would be absolutely swarmed by skeptics. And in this particular situation, the skeptics were swarmed by the proponents on this comment thread. And I think that scared the people at TED. I think they misread exactly how fast things are changing and how much it's changing. Because this is a huge change in Western culture. It is a steamroller going along, and Ted had the unfortunate mistake of getting in front of it and getting kind of crushed by it. Everything they did seemed like it was a measure of panic, because there were so many decisions they made that would have been easy otherwise. I mean, let's say, how hard would it have been to just leave the videos up, let this program here in West Hollywood continue, and then just let it go? Because these things will eventually die into the background. The only thing that stays on the internet are cute and humorous pictures of cats and babies. This would eventually die down, and all they had to do was let that happen. But I think they panicked and started to hold tighter and tighter. And this is what created such a difficult situation for them, because first of all, this got drawn out over a very long period and drew an enormous amount of interest. And by the time they took down TEDx West Hollywood, it was almost like they were trying to create this huge drama out of it. I mean, if they had done this intentionally, they could not have done a better job of drawing in the opposition, because everybody came out for this. On the comment threads, I recognized many of the people because I've been on the forums, and some of them have commented on my blogs. It was full of PhDs. Even Brian Josephson, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist, got on there. And these people really know their stuff. They're incredibly well informed. They, I think, are the leading edge of this steamroller forcing the change. And this is, I think, very threatening to the scientific establishment because they are getting pushed from below in a direction they really don't want to go. It's materialism versus dualism. The idea that the world is a giant mechanism versus the idea that the world is a giant thought. And the giant thought is winning with science. So what do we learn from this? Well, first of all, because they panicked, they scored a tactical victory. They did take down TEDx West Hollywood, and they did take down the 2 speeches. But I think strategically, they lost tremendously. This cannot have been terribly good for their reputation. And also, this was tremendously beneficial for us. I have nothing but gratitude for TED. I love them. Without them, I would not be speaking here today. They are my best friends. So what TED did was help galvanize the community, and this is something that I was right in the middle of and enjoying every bit of it. Because even before we got to the incident with TEDx West Hollywood, there were something like 30 blogs covering this, including some of the heavyweights in the field. There's one called The Daily Grail and Reality Sandwich. There's several blogs that help spread the word. But also beyond that, a lot of personal blogs carried the message as well and created a lot of, I would guess, excitement over this. And a lot of people were able to make a lot of new connections, including me. I got to meet a lot of people that I never would have, I just never would have met any other way. And what this demonstrates is that the internet has sped it all up by an immense degree. It's exponential because the pressure on the old system has built to an enormous degree. Now, one of the visuals I use for this is that this is like a large river building up behind a shaky dam. Downstream, you're not going to see much for a while as the old guard holds everything back and holds tighter and tighter to keep the new ideas out. But the water is building up behind this dam, and it's doing this on a regular basis like clockwork. Larry Dossey was sharing with me this morning that 30 years ago they had the word health nut. And all of this stuff is now mainstream in medicine, and they're teaching some of the alternative things. This is a train that's not going to stop. So we have this big river building up behind this shaky dam. And like I said, you're not going to see a lot coming downstream, but when this starts to really crack, which I think is probably going to be within the next 10 years or so, it's going to completely go. And you're going to find a lot of careers getting born out of this, and a lot of them fading into obscurity. Now, naturally, this would be very threatening to some people, and very awakening to others. But that's the message here. This is not about TED. TED is just a litmus test of what's happening, and it's a demonstration of the power of the internet and what it's been able to do to bring the people together who were basically scattered literally all over the world. When TEDx was taken down, they got donations from Australia Britain, Canada, of course, the United States, Slovenia. Somebody from Slovenia donated. And a tremendous amount of just support from people, thanking them for going forward and thanking them for everything that they'd done. And it's an amazing journey. I'm really happy to be part of it. And I hope all of you have the opportunity to get out there and do a little bit yourself and just see how powerful and uplifting this whole thing is. Thank you.
So one of the things about what's happened is we're informal now. We don't have to be kind of in our little slots and whatever. So in my informality, I just want to say one thing about your wonderful talk. Dualism and materialism. I don't think you meant dualism. No. So that's
okay.
A big one.
Thank you.
So it was a little one, I wouldn't say anything, but that's a big one. So it's materialism versus Gaianism or whatever. I don't think we have a really good word for what's the opposite of materialism, but...
Yeah, I had to pick something.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks. Thank you.
Hello, welcome. I'm Suzanne Taylor. And as I said when Craig first, when I introduced Craig, I'm sure you all pretty much know the background of, we don't have to recapitulate what we're doing here. It's been quite a scramble to recreate this event in the last 2 weeks, and then in the last 2 days to get the live stream recreated. So all you tweeters out there, the hashtag is SueStream. And if you would get this message going all over the world for people to tune into the live stream, that would be wonderful. So where are we here? Hopefully we're at the beginning of something quite wonderful. I took on this event for TED because of the significance of the platform and because I'm really interested in changing the world. For some years, many years, I've been producing events and projects that have to do with personal growth, started out. And it has moved into paradigm change, worldview change. About 10 years ago, I started on another, I got a little diverted, not diverted, but I took on a major category of project where I'd been producing a lot of different events. My house was a gathering place for progressive thinkers. And I became enamored of the crop circles, which I've been rather laughed at on some of these blogs, but it's not a laughing matter. The only reason I was interested in them is because they could change consciousness. You know, if we knew we were being visited, which indications are, the science on the subject has left us thinking we're not making them, aside from the ones that we are making. Yeah. So I thought, well, if that were the fact, oh, somebody's going to hand me my DVD. We're going to show you the trailer later. Oh, thank you. My movie. Bill, this is definitely not a TED event.
We love you, Suzanne.
Thank you. So I got so enmeshed in doing in this phenomenon because I thought, you know, it's a slow process to change consciousness, heaven knows. You know, we spend our lifetime doing it, and maybe a few lifetimes. But then when I thought, this could do it overnight. You know, if we knew we were being visited, we'd be one humanity in relation to the other. There's nothing that makes us one humanity now. And we'd have to rethink everything. We wouldn't be the center of the universe. There'd be other intelligence equal or greater than our own. It would humble us. You know, it would have to have a very beneficial effect. So I ended up being, you know, very pulled off my course, so to speak. Well, not off my course. I had my side issue. Well, I was eager to get back to a broader platform, and so I got myself involved with TED. I thought, yeah, this is a place where I can speak to the world, my fundamental passion to change everything and to, I don't know, some of us get a mission, you know, we get born some way. And my mission seemed to be to pay attention to everything and try to change it. I'm a generalist. I'm not an ice skater, not a brain surgeon, you know. I know a little bit about a lot of things. And so I don't know why, I've been focused on how can we turn this thing around, the whole thing. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but then again, why not, you know? Anyway, it has been my passion. And we will show the trailer later. So after we were no longer TED 2 weeks ago, we lost our sponsorship of the wonderful, wonderful West Hollywood Library. We were so well supported before. It's a state-of-the-art library. The architect who built it is one of our speakers, or who designed it is one of our speakers. And they were so generous to us. And we were in the council chambers for the city. It's a beautiful spot. And so when we were no longer that, the city couldn't support us anymore. You know, it took me 6 months to get the bureaucracy of any city to cooperate. And so they couldn't support us when we were no longer TED. That was what they officially supported. So I thought, okay, we're going to do this. Let's make it even more phantasmagorical. And here we are. You are in for such a treat. The live stream audience won't get the treat quite as nicely as you will. I mean, you're in it. They're going to kind of be watching it from the outside. But here we are in something really spectacular and suited to my kind of proclivity for doing things that are a little bit, what would we say? Exciting, a little racy. So our first speaker is the person who is the designer. He is the Vortex Immersion Dome and many other domes all over, including converting planetariums to shows like we are in the midst of that you'll be seeing during the course of the day. The other thing I want to tell you about the course of the day is at lunchtime, we're actually going to go out in 2 shifts. The shift that remains will get the show. You can't get the whole show while the speakers are on. You just get little kind of a taste of it. But during this lunchtime, we're going to give you the show. So this group over here will remain. You can't all get fed at once anyway. So that will help relieve what's going on out there. And when this group is finished with the show, this group over here will have gotten their lunch and can then come back in here for the second show. So now it is my really great pleasure. By the way, did I tell you thank you for coming? I think I didn't. No. You know, one of the things about this time crunch is rehearsal has been sketchy. So, but we're informal, we're friends, we're family, and I feel that way. I'm so appreciative of the people that I've connected with, as I said in the beginning. It really feels to me like for my own life, which I was so eager to get back to after, you know, selling a movie for a couple of years, to have a family again, a family of co-creators, and they've all stayed with us. You know, when Ted left, they didn't leave. So, you know, we wanted to be Tedsters. It's a big deal in the world. Well, now, I don't know. Soosters? I don't know. I don't know. But they're with me and with us, and we have a fabulous, fabulous team that has made this thing all happen for you today. If it were lighter, I'd introduce them, but it's too dark. So, but the first person I'm going to introduce is Ed Lantz, who is the Vortex Immersion Dome. But not only that, he's a student of consciousness. And so it's like perfect. I love my speakers, by the way. What Ted did to prevent people from seeing these wonderful speakers, really punch them out, you know. So where's Ed? Here he is. Okay. Okay. So I give you Ed Lantz.
Hi. Welcome to the Vortex Dome. My name's Ed Lantz. I'm president and CTO of Vortex Immersion Media. Okay, so just a little about me. I had a vision of domes when I was a teenager, oddly enough, as spaces where we're immersing a live audience and the performers projecting their consciousness on the dome and taking people deep into inner realms of consciousness. And I wrote a little science fiction ditty about it. It stuck with me all these years, and it really inspired the space that you're in. A little about my background. Well, a little admission here. I am a skeptic. I am an engineer, a practicing engineer. I'm trained as a physicist, and I'm skeptical of the whole darn thing. I'm skeptical of the skeptics and the scientismists who think they know everything and have it all locked down, because I don't think they do. And I'm skeptical of magical thinking, where we're like, oh, everything's possible. Well, jump off a building and tell me you're going to fly, using your mind. I don't know. But I believe that these two seeming polarities can coexist, and which is what I'd like to talk about. Just a little about me. Also, we launched a network called Harmony Channel some years ago. I've designed digital domes all over the world, Library of Alexandria, Papalote Museum, Mexico City, and so on. Next slide, please. And I'm going to move through these slides like really fast. Really, really, really fast. And the other thing about me is I am a student of consciousness, and just amazed as a scientist at these inner realms within me, and trying to understand it. And I'm like, why isn't anyone paying attention to this? Oh, you can't go there. Well, I'm like, sorry. So the scientist to me is studying the outer realm of phenomenology. The next slide shows the intuitive, or the mystic. Please, next slide. And the mystic is the inner realm of phenomenology. Next slide, please. Did it hang? Okay. Well,
Which slide?
that's good. Go back one. Yeah, okay, the intuitive, okay. Back one, please. So I just want to, okay, forward. Oh, there we go. No, we're good. Now the next one. There we go. I'm sorry. We're supposed to have a monitor here. If you guys can get that working, that would be so awesome. So the intuitive is going within and finding truths and finding things. And oh my God. And then when you go to share it, well, can be very difficult to share these inner experiences. Okay, next slide. Please. So anyway, well, let me just talk. So I've been inspired by scientists. I've been inspired by mystics, both. And next slide. And to me, I mean, what this is all about is like bringing the two together. This is about healing. Okay, we're not divisive and attacking each other and this sort of thing. Look, let's figure it out. That's what scientists. That's the spirit of science, is to figure this stuff out. And so to me, I want to go into my inner realms with the quest of what is this and how does it work, and gee, I just had an out-of-body experience. What the heck is that? Oh, it's just firing neurons. No, that's not a good enough explanation, because that interacted with this, which interacted with this other thing. Something's going on here, and I want to know what it is, right? So the scientist in me comes out, and when you put the two together, look at all these wonderful people. Jules Verne, I'd maybe add to that list. He's not a scientist, but these visionaries have driven science. These are people who've gone within and seen things and come out with these incredible intuitive leaps of science, and that's the paradigm shifting that Kuhn talked about. Next. So to me, the challenge of mysticism, if you will, if you want to call it that, what do we call it? Dualism, it's like taking your inner state of affairs seriously, is what we're talking about here, is what I'm referring to. The challenge is, there's a lot of stuff that happens in there that's kind of hard to share. And then when you speak to people, it's like, what are you talking about? If they haven't had the same experience, right? So Next slide. So there's this challenge of mysticism to communicate these inner experiences. So that brings us to going back to my childhood and this vision of the domes. I'm like, oh my God, you can communicate with this immersive media. You can communicate inner states of consciousness. So that's like one of the things that's driving me to do this. Now, of course, science education and all this other stuff these domes are being used for, you just see on the next slide, is immersive cinema. I mean, these are, and there are about 1,200 of these domes around the world now, in science centers, in museums, and they're immersing young people and taking them into other worlds. Worlds imagined, worlds of scientific simulations, real places around the planet. It's just incredible. So we have this now, this wideband communication medium that can actually take over your brain. And and all these different markets. You have themed entertainment, thrill rides. You have these little portable planetariums they take out in the bush in Africa, right? Giant screen theaters like IMAX domes. They're all converting to digital now, and which means they're accessible to any kid with a laptop. And the digital planetariums, of which there's over 1,000. Next. So what's cool about this kind of programming is it can trigger conceptual realizations and deeper understanding, but the next slide is the affective domain. And there's all kinds of things that you can trigger in people, some of which are maybe better left for private. Goosebumps, awe, mind-opening experiences. So that's where we like to go with this. Next. So there's digital domes all over the world. Next. Mobile domes that we're taking, and these are events that we've done. Super Bowl, South by Southwest. We're taking these domes out and we're doing corporate activations. Sometimes it's like corporate. It's like digital wallpaper, more than an awe-inspiring experience. But it's cool stuff, and it's a new field that's taking off now. So next. So this is our dome here in LA, and the next slide will show you how we are doing all these cool events. We're developing content of all types. Bali Doll is what that is. Amrita Sen is an artist who comes in here with a whole stage full of dancers, right, and puts on this big show with this immersive backdrop. It's really cool stuff. Next these are just a few shows in development. Legacy was actually requested of Kate and I to develop a show that would communicate peace and non-duality. So it's like overcoming the shadow, and all these archetypal characters are dancers outside of this couple with their inner processes revealed. Next slide is a show called Awakening. This is a shamanic kind of a show that came to us and that we're helping to develop. Next is digital spas, and these are environments which you'll see on the next slide is the purpose here, just keep going there, is to deliver experiences that are wellness, promote wellness, right, in these environments. So, and finally what you have here is where we're taking this into the cinemas and cineplexes, big gaming domes and like that. So as a medium, it's going to be used for all kinds of things, games and whatnot. I'm just encouraging the consciousness community to come into these spaces and let's rock it up, And rock and roll. I love this. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you all for being here. Blessings.
I'm not getting up there because you're going to watch something else now. I invited Katie Goodman, and she was accepted to come here. She's part of a troupe called Broad Comedy. She's the founder of it. But she got a very high-paying gig. So we're going to show you a video of hers, and you will see why it is quite perfect to kind of start us out in this early part of the program. So Katie Goodman from Broad Comedy.
There's never been a time. There's never been a time never been a time as fucked up as this. As fucked up as this. I didn't fuck it up. You probably didn't fuck it up. But they, whoever they are, they fucked it up. Now it's fucked up. I can't unfuck it up. You probably can't unfuck it up. And if we're counting on them to unfuck it up, then we're all fucked. Okay, now here's where you come in. You don't have to sing, just turn to the person next to you and ask them nicely, did you fuck it up? Go on, ask them. How about you? Did you fuck it up? Now sit back and look at them and say, cause you look like someone who could have fucked it up. Now it's fucked up. Now let's pick ourselves up off the floor and create a tone of camaraderie and ask, could you help unfuck it up? And then say, are you really so fucking busy you can't take one fucking minute to help unfuck it up? And then lose the righteous asshole attitude and take a breath and say, because I'm willing to pick one thing to help unfuck it up. Won't you join me? Oh, that's better. Does it feel better? Yeah, I'm feeling the love. The problem is, you just can't help feeling bitter that it's fucked up to begin with. You just go round and round like this. Okay, back with me now. I didn't fuck it up. Let it out. Come on. You know you feel it. You probably didn't fuck it up. You don't have to believe it. Just go with it for now. But that's right. Shift the blame. They fucked it up. Now it's fucked up. That's right. Okay, yeah, you're clapping, but the problem is deep down inside, you're feeling depressed and hopeless, right? You're just gonna change the world. What the hell happened? Okay, I got it. We're gonna come together for this one. I need your help. We're gonna fill this room up with love and inspiration, and it won't last past the time you leave here tonight, but everybody on this side, let's all unfuck it up. Okay, real loud and proud. Let's all unfuck it up. Now you gotta keep going without me when I leave you. Here we go. Let's all unfuck it up. Doesn't that feel good? Keep it rolling. Now over here, we have a special part. It's a little repetitive, but it's fucked, 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 it's fucked. It's fucked, it's fucked. Can you do that? It's fucked, it's fucked. Okay, middle, ready? I wanna be an unfucker. I wanna be an unfucker. That's right, it's fucked, it's fucked, it's fucked, it's fucked, it's fucked. Oh, yeah, really loud. One more time with all your heart now.
What a tough act to follow, but you know what? This guy can do it. So this is Paul Cummins. I have known about Paul Cummins forever. He is a legend in Los Angeles. He's an educator, but an educator who has a very forward-thinking perspective. And his forward-thinking perspective, he's the founder of Crossroads High School, by the way, where, one of the best private high schools in the city, right? one of our team members is a teacher there. It's a fabulous high school, and he's gone on to found another school called New Roads. I'm not going to give you big introductions of people's credits, because we have a board out there and you can read them. I'll tell you more about what I think about them, why they're on the program. So the philosophy that Paul is subscribed to and that he's going to talk about here is so dear to my heart. I have a book that I have bought over 1,000 copies of. Has anybody here bought 1,000 copies of anything? You can't know me without having had to read this book, because it's a creation story. It's how we all came to be. And because I can do this here now, I can show you my little personal tidbits. Okay, here's the book. It's called The Universe is a Green Dragon by Brian Swim. Yeah, so my friends here have read this book. So, who, by the way, is one of the world's most wonderful human beings. Not just a good book, but a fabulous being. And he couldn't come, unfortunately. He's in Northern California. But I would have given him the stage in a minute, obviously. But Paul is going to talk to you about the mentor, Thomas Berry, who was Brian Swim's mentor. In fact, they wrote a book together called The Universe Story, and he pays great homage to Thomas Berry. So it is with double pleasure that I give you Paul Cummins.
Thank you, Dick. Thank you all. It's a real honor to be here with such an incredible group of speakers and such an incredibly enlightened audience in this wonderful place. I think it was about 13 years ago that my daughter came to see me. She had to talk, and she had just gotten back from a trip to Europe, and she said, "Dad, I think I know now what I want to do with my life." And I said, "What's that?" And she said, "I think I want to be an environmental worker." And I said, "Well, Anna, I'm really very proud of you, but I also have to confess to just a little bit of sadness in that decision." And she said, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, I'm afraid you're going to experience nothing but heartbreak for your whole career." And she said, "Oh, Dad, I know we're screwed, but I want to do what I can." And I thought, my God, when I was her age, I thought the world was my oyster. I did not think that there were huge problems that couldn't be overcome. I didn't think we were doomed as a species or as a planet, which many people now think we are. I graduated from Stanford in 1959, never having heard the word ecology. I didn't know the word, I didn't know the concept. Rachel Carson hadn't written her book. That was going to come 3 years later. And so notions of global warming or losing our glaciers or soil erosion all over the planet or holes in the ozone layer or deforestation or massive overpopulation that is threatening everything. These were not concepts that I and my classmates were dealing with when we graduated and went on into our various careers. Something's happened in the last 30, 40, 50 years that's pretty dramatic. We just heard a song about it. And many of you probably heard the story, but there was this guy sitting in his living room one night reading, and he hears a knock at the door. And he goes and opens the door, he looks around, and there's nothing there. He looks down, he happens to see a snail there, so he reaches down, picks it, and fires it across the lawn, slams the door, and goes back. But a year later, he's sitting in his living room again reading. Here's a knock at the door. He goes and opens the door, looks around, nothing there. He looks down, there's a snail. And the snail looks up at him and says, "What the hell was that about?" And so you have to wonder, what the hell has this last 40 years been about? Well, there have been a bunch of stories that people have told. Economic stories, many extraordinary scientific stories about how we got to where we are today, where in a 40, 50-year period, we're now talking about the possible extinction of all species, the doom of the planet, and so on and so on. So how did we get there? Well, there are many stories of how we got there, and one of my beliefs that I've come here, as Suzanne said, to share with you, is that we have the wrong story. And that it is our very own story, our own creation stories, and our story of our relationship to the earth that has got us into this mess in the first place. So the kind of the Christian, Judeo-biblical story about God creating the heavens and earth and giving man dominion over the heavens and earth is what the very story that Thomas Berry says we need to take a hard look at. And what Berry says is that we are not transcendent to the earth, we human beings. We are of the earth. We came out of the earth. We are stardust become conscious of itself, which is an extraordinary concept. But it seems to me dead on accurate. And what has happened is that in this 13.7.8 billion year story of our universe and the roughly 4.6 billion years of Earth, that it's been a natural process that has evolved and evolved and evolved. And if, as Barry and some others have done, if you take a look at the 4.6 billion years of the Earth and take that into 24 hours and look at it as a 24-hour period, we human beings are in the last 30 seconds of that, and modern history is the last 3 or 4 seconds. And in the last 2 or 3, 4 seconds, we human beings have taken what Barry calls a process that has been on automatic pilot all these billions of years, and in a few seconds we've put it on manual. And who's at the switch? Us. And what is driving us, part of it is the story of our not being of the earth, but having dominion over the earth. Well, that was a benign story until the big paradigm shift, which what I think is the big paradigm shift of the last 300-400 years, which is the industrial technological revolution. Because when that happened, 3 things happened. First of all, it brought people off of farms into the cities. And so relationships to the earth got fewer and fewer and fewer. And secondly, then, this creature, these human beings, now had the power to take their dominion over the earth and really mess it up really badly, which is what we've done. I'm blanking on his first name, David Cummins, said that there have been 5 sort of major losses of species over the history of the planet, and or 6 actually. He said in the first 5 were basically these massive losses of species, extinctions, were caused by what he calls a shitstorm of asteroids. He said, but the 6th shitstorm is us, human beings, having taken this evolutionary process off of automatic pilot and putting it on manual. So the second thing we've done is to take our dominion over the earth, and at best we're caretakers, but we have not been good caretakers, and we've been destroyers. And it's the third thing, horrible thing that this paradigm shift has done is to reinforce a whole new mythology, which is the mythology of progress, and that progress is somehow measurable in economic terms, in terms of profit, in terms of gross national product, and so on and so on. And so what we are defining as progress is really the depletion of our resources. So we're defining progress as the destruction of our home, our Mother Earth. And I don't mean that as some la-la granola head. It's just a reality that the earth is where we live. It is our home, and it is what we came out of. So that's the bad news part of my little talk here today. Is there good news? Yes, there's good news, I believe. And the good news is that most of the problems that we're going to be talking about here today, and that I've been alluding to, were created by human beings. Consequently, human beings could correct these and change these. But as Thomas Berry says, not only do we have the wrong story, we're in between stories. We don't have the new story yet, but it's all around us, and it's in this room. And the threads of the new story are represented by the speakers here today, the organizations that many of you represent, and we somehow have to weave them into a new story. Primitive people, we call them primitive, had a relationship to the earth. They lived in harmony with the earth. They had a sense of reverence for the earth. And they celebrated the earth. Well, we need to get back to that. We need to go forward by getting back to that, but somehow harmonizing it with what we know about evolution and about biology and about astrophysics and about all the science that we now know. We somehow have to use that with and weave that in to this new story of a relationship to the earth. So it would mean a fundamentally different approach to education. And I mentioned my daughter at the beginning of this speech. One of the things that I've learned from my daughter, she and her husband, a young man named Marcus Erickson, created their own little foundation called 5 Gyres, and they've gone around the world researching the different gyres where ocean currents come and create these slow-moving masses where garbage collects and decomposes and little fish eat what they think is plankton, but it's little pieces of plastic and so on up the chain. And one of the things that they were talking to me about once is the concept of a throwaway society, which I'd never really thought too much about until you start asking yourself, where is away? There is no away. This earth is our home, so you can't throw anything away without damaging your home. And then I got to thinking, well, in our education system, not only do we not teach that, but we also are willing to throw away children. And we throw away children by giving them a miserable education and by having set up the system that we have in this country where some people get a super education and others get a terrible education. And, what was the old bumper sticker? If you think education is expensive, try ignorance. Suzanne, when she introduced me, talked about my old school, Crossroads School. Crossroads this year will be spending about $32,000 per pupil. And my other daughter, Emily, works in a school district called Lenox, which is a dirt poor community over by LAX, by the airport, and they're spending $5,000 per pupil. Now, it's completely upside down. The kids in Lenox are the ones that need the $32,000 spent on them. The kids who go to Crossroads are going to do just fine in this world. But I don't want to take that $32,000 away from them. I want the kids in Lenox to get a $32,000 per pupil education. And the reason is that the $32,000 is not luxury, it's quality. So let's give quality to every child in America, and not just the kids who happen to have the good fortune to have been born to parents who can send them to private schools or who live in neighborhoods where they spend a realistic amount of money, an adequate amount of money per pupil. Whoever gives me the hook, now you better shout out at me, hook, because I'm just getting warmed up on this, and I know I'm supposed to only talk for 9 minutes, so I'll try and bring it to a swifter close. And just so you know how, as the song said, effed up our values are, we're spending the 6,000 in some small school districts per pupil, the 32 at Crossroads, and then depending on who you talk to, my foundation, New Visions Foundation, has had a program at a place called Camp Gonzales, which is one of the 14 incarceration facilities around Los Angeles. And the previous chief of probation admitted to me one day that they're spending, he thinks, about $125,000 a year per bed up there. And Connie Rice, who many of you know of, said that's a complete crock. She said they're spending like over $200,000 to lock a boy up. So we're willing to spend $200,000 to lock kids up, $5,000 to educate them, and $32,000 to give a quality education to the privileged kids of our society. It led British writer Marina Warner to say, well, in America you have expensive children and you have cheap children. and we do. What's the net result of that? Injustice is expensive, but it's not only expensive because you're spending somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000 to lock a kid up. It's expensive because then those kids are not getting the quality education that would lead them to go out in society and do good things. So there's a boy who's an intern at our foundation who I got to know at Camp Gonzales. What we do up at Camp Gonzales is bring elective programs to kids that they would get if they went to Crossroads. So the irony is here they're locked up in a probation facility, and for the first time in their lives, many of them are falling in love with education because they're getting the kind of things they should be getting in the public schools. Well, one boy, Edwin, when he got out, we went and met with his family, and it's a long story, but we sent Edwin off to one of these kind of tough love boarding schools in Colorado. We flew him there twice so that they would accept him on full scholarship. And the first thing they did was take Edwin out on a 4-day vision quest where he had to be all by himself out there. He almost freaked out. This is an inner city kid who's been locked up several times, but he gutted it out, and it totally changed his life. So one of the things that we need to do in education is also, and one of the reasons we need to spend more money on our schools, is to get kids outdoors, to get them on not just field trips, but trips where they can go sleep under the stars, where they can take walks on the beach. How are we going to save this planet if we have no relationship to it? And if we have kids in inner city schools that have never, a mile from the ocean, who've never seen the oceans. So we need to have garden projects, and these are part, and these trips to the outdoors, these are part of the strands that we need to weave together into this new story. And the new story, I'm getting the hook, okay, I will wrap it up. The new story is that the earth is not something to exploit, it's something to revere, to celebrate, and to recognize the interdependence of all of us. And if I have time, I'd like to read conclude with a few lines from a poem by William Stafford, a wonderful 20th century poet. And the controlling metaphor in this poem is a circus coming to town with the lead elephant and coming into town, and then behind the elephant behind him is holding his tail by the trunk, and tail, trunk, and so all the elephants are coming into town, and if the elephant makes a wrong turn, the circus doesn't get to town. And we've made a wrong turn with our creation stories. We need to get the new story, and we all need to push for it in every way we can. The poem is entitled A Ritual to Read to Each Other. If you don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, a pattern that others made may prevail in the world, and following the wrong God home, we may miss our star. And as elephants parade holding each elephant's tail, but if one wanders, the circus won't find the park. I call it cruel, and maybe the root of all cruelty, to know what occurs, but not recognize the fact. And so I appeal to a voice, to something shadowy, a remote, important region in all who talk. Though we could fool each other, we should consider, lest the parade of our mutual life get lost in the dark. For it is important that awake people be awake, or a breaking line may discourage them back to sleep. The signals we give, yes or no or maybe, should be clear. The darkness around us is deep. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. That is so my story. That's so Brian Swim's story. But I'm thinking when we cut that video for you and you get to use it, you got a word in there that nobody's going to understand why you said that. So, because you had just seen Katie Goodman. So I don't know, we may have to do a loop and make louse up the world as the phrase in there. So from one treat to another, Dr. Larry Dossey, will you join me on stage? So don't we look good together? Trying to steal him, but he has a long-term wife. Oh, well. So Larry Dossey is a person kind of to be at the beginning of this program, because as Paul Cummins just told you the kind of Gaian story of the Earth, Larry's got the story of the band of reality that's beyond this ordinary reality. And he is such a really first-class representative of all of that kind of realm, the psi realm that Craig was talking about before. I told you could read everybody's credits, but he was chief of staff of a hospital. He's an internal medicine physician and has written many books, has a huge following, deservedly so, and speaks about the relationship between the body and consciousness, my favorite kind of topic. So, my great pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Larry Dossey.
Thank you, dear. Thank you. I am really glad you're here. I'm really glad I'm here. Now, I want to tell you what I'm going to talk about by referring to the very best book review I've ever had in my life, which was given back in 1982 when my first book was published, a book called Space, Time, and Medicine. Someone asked my mother after the book was out, "What do you think about Larry's new book?" And my mom, without any hesitation whatsoever, said, "Well, I can't understand a word of it. But if my boy wrote it, it's right." So I'm just going to talk to you about what's right today. That's what, well, my field, as Suzanne generously mentioned, has been internal medicine for most of my adult life, but I've had a side interest also. And it has to do with the fact that I was born very early in life as an identical twin. And all of my life, my twin brother and I have had stuff going back and forth between us, which we just call twin stuff. And it has to do with things that are very difficult to describe. Shared thoughts and sensations and feelings and sometimes physical symptoms, even while we are great distances apart. And to compound this twin thing, I happen to be married to a twin. This is my wife, Barbara. She is a fraternal twin, and she and her twin brother have had this stuff in spades going on in their life. So our household has been sort of a twin laboratory for a lot of weird stuff for as long as I can remember. Now, there is a huge literature about this which drives skeptics nuts. It's almost always neglected. It's not in the textbooks, but if you search it out, it's not difficult to find. One of the pioneers who really put this field on the map was the well-known psychiatrist from the University of Virginia who has written widely with respect to children who remember past lives. He had another interest, which was these shared distant kind of symptoms which are inexplicable conventionally. He called them telepathic impressions, but if you go looking in the literature, the term you will find is something called telesomatic events. If you want to have your mind blown about this stuff, this is the go-to book. It's Twin Telepathy by the British consciousness researcher Guy Playfair. Now, let me describe one of these things to you because this really brings the mind-body connection and the brain and consciousness connection into real focus and illuminates the problems therein. First of all, we know that about 30% of identical twins have these sorts of distant, remote, non-local connections, and this is what they look like. This case was reported from the 1970s. It dealt with 4-year-old twin girls in northern Spain, Sylvia and Marta Landa. Well, Marta was taken by the father to the grandparents' house many miles away. Sylvia stayed home with her mom. Unfortunately, as the mother was ironing, Sylvia put her hand on a red-hot iron and erupted in a second-degree blister. And at the same time, miles and miles away at the grandparents' house, Marta erupted with the same sort of blister on the same hand, the same pattern, and in the same place on the palm. Go figure. Now, I began having another category of weird experiences the very first year I was in internal medicine practice. This took the form of precognitive dreams. For some reason, I began to dream about events that would play out in the lives of patients I would see the next day. I found this very unnerving. I realized immediately that if I began to talk about this publicly, this would not be the very best way to advance my career in medicine. But this stuff would not go away, largely because when the nurses who I worked with in the hospital found out that I had an interest in this, they began to shower me with their own experiences along these lines. And my patients began to report their experiences about precognitive dreams in which they would dream their diagnosis and sometimes the treatment, which when they came to me the next day would play out in their life. The last leg on that three-legged stool was when my colleagues began to share their experiences with me, and they would usually preface their story with something like this. You know, I've never told anybody this in my life. But you could tell that this had deep meaning for them, and they needed to express it and get it out. I'll never forget a lecture I gave at a Harvard Medical School conference for continuing medical education for internal medicine doctors, in which I was talking about these kinds of experiences and how common that I suspect they are in my profession. And during the Q&A session, a very earnest female internist stood up in the middle of this group and she said, well, I want to confess my story. She said, I get numbers in my dreams. She said, I dream these specific laboratory values of my patients' lab tests before I even order the tests. And that was just a warm-up. And it went from there. I think this is one of the best-kept secrets in modern medicine. It also is one of the biggest problems in modern medicine because, as I've already implied, this stuff is not in the textbooks, and officially, these things just cannot happen. Now, it's interesting to look at the way these prohibitions are phrased. This is from Carl Sagan, the famous astronomer. The brain's workings, what we sometimes loosely refer to as the mind, are a consequence of the brain's anatomy and physiology and absolutely nothing more. This is the materialistic approach that dominates the conversation these days, as Greg Weiler has already described. It's not difficult to find these things. John Searle, one of the leading mind-body philosophers in the country at UC Berkeley, says this: consciousness can't spread over the universe like a thin veneer jam. There has to be a point where my consciousness ends and yours begins. Now, if you fool around in this area, you will understand immediately that these conversations and dialogues often get very overheated. And sometimes it's at a point where we just simply need to sit down, shut up, and take a deep breath and ask seriously some fundamental questions. Among them is, how in the world could a physical brain produce consciousness in the first place? This is not often done. But when serious people address this, they often come out with some things that make them look like a deserter to the skeptic's cause. This is such a comment from Steven Pinker, the well-known the experimental psychologist from Harvard University. He was once asked, how is it that consciousness is produced by the brain? And he said, beats the heck out of me. I have some prejudices, but I have no idea how to begin to look for a defensible answer. And neither does anybody else. So Stuart Kaufman, the theoretical biologist and complex systems theorist, says much the same thing. Professor Kaufman says, nobody has the faintest idea what consciousness is. I don't have any idea, nor does anybody else, including the philosophers of mind. I love these comments. I don't know why. It's something of... Freeman Dyson, one of the most famous physicists of our time, says, the origin of life is a total mystery, and so is the existence of human consciousness. We have no clear idea how the electrical discharges occurring in nerve cells in our brain are connected with our feelings and desires and actions. Jerry Fodor, one of the most prestigious mind-body philosophers at Rutgers, nobody has the slightest idea how anything material could be conscious. Nobody even knows what it would be like to have the slightest idea how anything material, such as the brain, could be conscious. So much for the philosophy of consciousness. This from one of the most prestigious mind-body philosophers in our country. Donald Hoffman, my favorite cognitive scientist at UC Irvine, sums it up. The scientific study of consciousness is in the embarrassing position of having no scientific theory of consciousness. Folks, this is where we are in this debate. And when you hear skeptics offer these arrogant and presumptuous comments that we figured it out and you people are wrong, it's all in the brain, you don't have to go there. And the conventional view of separateness, separation, individual brains and minds and whole people, the whole premise of separation among human beings, I want to contend is false. And this is one of those false stories that we have been dragooned into accepting as fact. And in fact, when we look at empirical observations, we see that minds are not separate, they're connected. So what does this evidence look like? Well, let's go down to the component of brains, which are neurons. If you take a bunch of human neurons and put them in a petri dish and put them in something called a Faraday cage, which is shielded optically and electromagnetically, and you do the same thing with another batch and put them over here in another Faraday cage so that these things cannot possibly have any sort of physical communication with each other, and you stimulate one of them, one batch with a laser light, the other one changes instantly in the same way. This makes skeptics go crazy. This is not supposed to happen. But it does happen, and these studies have been replicated by the same group and with other groups as well. And if you want to look at the data, this is Dr. Rita Pizzi in Italy who pioneered this particular methodology. She says, our experimental data seem to suggest strongly that biological systems present non-local properties not explainable by classical models. So you can go to huge collections of neurons, not just a few neurons in petri dishes. Our favorite large connection of neurons is our own brain. And if you take people and wire them up with an EEG over here and send somebody a long way off, also wired up to have an electroencephalogram brainwave tracing made, and you stimulate one brain, if these people are emotionally close, the other individual's brain changes instantly in the same pattern. You can switch off from EEG to functional magnetic imaging, resonance imaging, and see the same simultaneous transitions go on. Here is a body of information not a lot of people know about. It's called social network connections. It shows not just unification between distant neurons or distant brains, but whole groups of people tend to be unified as well. This work came out of the investigations by Dr. James Fowler, who's a political scientist at UC San Diego, and also Nicholas Christakis, who is a doctor and social scientist at Harvard Medical School. This data has been published in the British Medical Journal and the New England Journal of Medicine, and this is what it looks like. Christakis says, happiness is contagious. Your happiness depends not just on your choices and actions, but also on the choices and actions of people you don't even know who are 1, 2, and 3 degrees removed from you. Fowler says, if your friend's friend's friend becomes happy, that has a bigger impact on your being happy than if somebody put an extra $5,000 in your pocket. You want to try? Volunteer for that one. Christakis sums up, emotions have a collective existence. They're not just an individual phenomenon. And so how could this stuff work? I mean, whether you're a skeptic or a devotee and proponent, we all want to know how it works. Well, here's how it works, and I'm happy I'm here to reveal this to you because you can take this explanation to the bank. As Sir Arthur Eddington said in another context, something unknown is doing we don't know what. This has become my favorite go-to explanation for everything. The leading hypothesis, and for the skeptics, I emphasize this is not a theory, this is a hypothesis, has to do with a quantum explanation based in a phenomenon called entanglement, which is a term that the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Erwin Schrödinger advanced in the 1920s. This is how Dean Radin, chief scientist at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, sees entanglement. Minds are entangled with the universe, so in principle, minds can non-locally influence anything, including a collection of other minds or physical systems. And so if we look at the picture that is beginning to emerge, what is the new story of consciousness that's coming into view? It is one in which consciousness is non-local, by which, among other things, we mean that it is unbounded. And because you can't put it in a box and wall it off from all the other consciousnesses out there, in some dimension, at some level, consciousness come together in unity. And as a consequence of non-local unified minds, you can share wisdom and insight and creativity with other people. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room. If somebody in the room is smart, you can tap into that. There isn't even any room in non-local, unbounded awareness. Now, there are some very smart people who have understood the reality of this. This is never acknowledged for the most part. Among them was Thomas Edison, America's great inventor, who said, people say I've created things. I've never created anything. I get impressions from the universe at large and I work them out, but I'm only a plate on a record or a receiving apparatus, what you will. Thoughts are really impressions that we get from the outside. I think Edison was really a non-local kind of guy. So in this emerging picture of consciousness, isolation is simply a fiction. It's impossible in principle where consciousness is concerned. In this emerging picture, consciousness is communal. And community, therefore, gets back literally to what its etymology is. It's about communion. Community is about communing. And non-locality and entanglement permit that sort of thing. And so we don't have to engineer or invent this unity stuff. It's hardwired. It's factory installed. It's part of our original equipment. It is our birthright. So we only have to wake up to it, not invent it. And there's some deeper implications I want to note. You see, if consciousness is non-local or infinite in space and time, then in some sense it's eternal and immortal. Why immortal? Because temporal non-locality is the very meaning of immortality and eternality. And so this idea then of non-local, infinite, and unbounded consciousness begins to resemble the old horrifying idea of the soul. It's an aspect of who we are that has no beginning, no limit, no end, and is immortal, eternal, and boundless. And so this begins to allow us to resurrect what our ancestors used to refer to as the universal mind, and which the physicist Schrodinger called the one mind. As he expressed it, the overall number of minds is just one. In truth, this Nobel physicist said, in truth, there is only one mind. And if you will hang on to the fall, there is a brilliant book coming out. It is called One Mind, which I happened to write. There are ethical implications of this unitary mind. One which interests me as a physician is that if we're all connected, then there's always a collective global aspect to personal health, so that health is never really personal. If consciousness is unitary and it comes together, then the health of one person affects the health of everybody. And this allows us to rephrase the golden rule from something like this selfish conventional expression, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, to something like this. You better be compassionate to other people because in some sense, they are you. As Bohm said, physicist David Bohm, deep down the consciousness of mankind is one. As Thich Nhat Hanh said, you're me, I am you. Isn't it obvious that we inter-are? Nothing we do, however virtuous, can be accomplished alone, the theologian Reinhold Niebuhr said. As Luciano de Crescenzo, the author, said, we are each of us angels with only one wing, and we can only fly by embracing each other. Thank you.
These are just my favorite thoughts. You know, the earth is one, we are of the earth, and we are one on the earth, in the earth. And I have twin daughters, so you think this wasn't a thrill for me to watch this presentation? So I say yes to that also. They know what each other is thinking. So when you see Jim Favreau, this is the parade of the gorgeous guys. So Doug is, as I said, a very old friend of mine, and one of the nice things I like about his story, he was a television writer and came from, you know, the regular world of commerce and artistry, artistic commerce. And then he's moved into psychological realms. And one of the things I especially like is that he graduated from UCLA with his son, because he didn't do it the first time around. and then they went to the School of Spiritual Psychology, Santa Monica College?
University of Santa Monica.
University of Santa Monica. And they graduated together again. So he has a wonderful story to tell you that Larry Dossey is the theory, and Doug Hayes is the example.
Beautiful, thank you. My name is Doug Hayes, and I am delighted to be here with you and this incredible group of speakers. I am, as Suzanne said, very honored to follow Larry Dossey. He, at the intersection of spirit and medicine, is the living master. I'm more like the living proof. I'm going to tell you a miracle story. Now, that said, I'm not a member of any particular church or faith. I have no agenda, no axe to grind. I am a professional rescuer, an EMT, and a ski patroller. Western medicine has been very, very good to me. I have great respect for Western medicine. That said, I do share the view of Teilhard de Chardin, who said, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. I'm going to take you back 13 years, February of 2000. I was out on patrol on one of our local mountains. It was snowing. And I'm doing a hill check first thing in the morning and coming through an area where we had the snow guns on. It was closed to the public. And I'm just coming out of that area, skiing down below the last of the snow guns. And my skis ran across a berm of snow, from the guns, which was sticky and like glue. And my skis ran across that berm. They stopped dead. I kept going, busted out of my heel bindings, and pile-drived headfirst into the ground. It was like a bomb went off in my body. My screen went totally white. I found myself lying face down on the mountain, looking back up the hill. And I knew right away that I had no feeling or no movement from the neck down that I had lost that and that I had also lost the ability to breathe. I looked up the hill at that moment for something, anything, because let's face it, I was dying. And I saw my dad standing there. Now, it's a very unusual sight because my dad was not a skier, and he was also dead for 7 years at that time. And he didn't look like ghostly or woo at all. I mean, he was just standing there in his old brown pants and yellow windbreaker like he'd just come out for a walk. And I assumed he was there to take me over to the other side. And I said, mouthed the words, "What do I do now?" And he said, "Just breathe." And I always thought that was really good advice from my dad or from anybody. I looked down, noticed that my chest and was beginning to rise and fall again on its own, not of my own volition, but I was breathing again. Fast forward, rescue team starts to appear on scene. 6 guys I know very well, my fellow patrollers. I've always thought it was significant that these are the 6 guys that showed up because out of 150 or so patrollers associated with our hill, these were 6 very devout Christian guys. 1 was a minister, 2 were his deacons, and the 3 other guys very involved with their churches and very involved specifically with healing within their own traditions. They went to work to stabilize me for the trip down the hill, backboard, C-collar, O2, the whole 9 yards. And at a certain point, it came time to roll me over onto my back, log roll me onto the backboard. And when they did, I looked up at the sky for the first time. I kid you not, the clouds opened up, a shaft of light shot out of the sky and illuminated us there at the scene. And at this moment, the boys went off book. And I mean that they did something which is not in our patrol manuals anywhere. I know I've gone back and checked. They put their hands on me and they prayed. And they prayed that I would be healed, that my healing would forever be a demonstration of God's love, compassion, and will for me in my life and in this world, and that I would forever be a witness to that. Now, as they were praying, all my fear left me. I had the feeling that something extraordinary, maybe even miraculous, was taking place here, that it was something much bigger than I was, that I had a part to play in it, but whatever that part was, I was willing to play it, no matter what it was. They reached the end of the prayer, went to secure my hands across my chest, brought my hand in across my chest, it thumped across my chest. I said, "I feel that." Same thing with my left hand. Left hand came in, thump, I feel that. It's not like I just felt it now, very distant, very far away, but still there nonetheless. Before the prayer, there had been nothing, no motion, no sensation from the neck down. After the prayer, sensation began to return. So again, fast forward, I enter my early recovery in what I refer to as a state of grace. Just as clear and conscious and grateful a space as I've ever been in my life, seeing my body come back, seeing the things that I had taken for granted in my life come back one by one, day by day. Something I couldn't do the day before comes back, I can do it now, coming back to me as gifts. And I come to realize that the simple, the basic things that we do in our lives truly are that. They truly are gifts. They're not to be taken for granted. And so I got in the habit of what I call making rounds. I'd go around to the other patients in the hospital and exchange stories. And they'd tell me their stories, I'd tell them my story. And I saw when I would tell my story that it had an impact, that it made a difference, that it somehow connected them with their faith, somehow inspired them with their ability to recover. And so I told my story a lot. And I was out in the garden one day. We had this beautiful garden under these giant banyan trees, and my friend Vicky came to see me. Vicky I'd known since we were kids, teenagers, one of my oldest friends, and her husband, Michael, had also been my friend for many, many years. And Michael had died 5 years earlier from melanoma. Let me go on record as saying that is a raging bitch of a disease. In the last year of their life together, as Michael came undone, their relationship became just a horror show of pain and loss and rage and anger, hostility, resentment, the whole panoply of negative human emotion and pain. And when Michael died, yes, it was a tragedy, but in some ways it was a great relief. So I'm out in the garden sitting with Vicky, and I'm telling her about the miracle on the mountain, and I'm saying, I know that there are angels in this world, and that some of them wear red jackets with white crosses on them. And I know that there are at least 6 angels in this world that I can name. And then I had the strange sensation that someone else had joined the conversation, and I looked at Vicky and I said, "Vicky, there's one more angel, and it's Michael, and he's here." And for the next half hour, I had the experience of channeling, facilitating a conversation between Vicky and Michael on the other side. And what they said to each other, the words are not important, but what is important is they got to clear and cleanse all of that energy from the last year. They got to forgive themselves, forgive each other, and they got to say, I love you, one more time. Just a beautiful healing experience for all of us. Anyway, she goes away. I go back to my room. That night, Michael comes to see me again. Not an apparition, but a sensation, like in the garden. And he tells me something he wants me to tell his wife. Very specific, something very specific. I think I'm just crazy, so I don't call her right away. I sat with it all the next day until late the next night. Finally picked up the phone, called Vicky. I said, Vic, Michael came to see me again. And he wants me to tell you something very specific. And he wants me to tell you to reread the letter that he wrote you when the two of you first found out that he was terminal, the one you keep in the box under the bed. She lost it on the phone. She said, oh my God, I know exactly the letter that you mean. I haven't been able to read that letter for years, but just last night when I came home after what happened in the garden, I took that letter out of the box for the very first time and read it again for the very first time. Now, this was like the universe saying to me, just in case you think any of this is a coincidence, pay attention. So I did that. I was out in the garden the next day, praying, meditating. I held my hands up to the light. I said, if it's possible for some group of guys to come to me and put their hands on me, transmit this kind of healing energy to me, why couldn't I do that for someone else? The voice in the garden said, what makes you think you can't? Oh, I said. Spun my chair around, went back to inside, back up to the spinal unit, got off the elevator. The first person I see is my friend Pat. Pat, is a 300-pound black Baptist woman. She is there for pain management, rides around on one of those little rascal scooters. I said, Pat, come on, I need a witness. We go into Macy's room, wheel ourselves into Macy's room. Macy is another black woman. She's in her late 80s and in very bad shape at this hospital. They're just about to flush her out of the program. She can't walk, she can't eat, she can't sleep. She's got bed sores up and down her body. She's not participating in her therapy. And they're just at the point where they're about to flush Macy out of the hospital off to a facility where she would surely die. An abhorrent idea to Macy because all she wanted to do was go home. All she wanted to do was go home. We come up on either side of Macy's bed. I said, Macy, I've been out in the garden again. God told me that he was going to allow me to heal people by putting my hands on them. I will never forget the look of soul in those old eyes when she looked at me and she said, oh, would you put your hands on me, please? So that's what we did. Pat and I put our hands on her and we started to pray. I had no technique, no experience. I just went with what the guys on the hill had done for me. And Pat, for her part, was a professional prayer and prayed as only a 300-pound black Baptist woman can pray, with just, incredible devotion and music and just hallelujah and amen, the whole 9 yards. And between us, we create this just incredible, beautiful, moving, musical, powerful, healing energy in the room. Goes on for half an hour or so. After it's over, I'm totally exhausted. I look at these women and I say, it's been great, but I got to go to bed. So I did. I went to bed, got up the next morning, physical therapy, came out of physical therapy in my wheelchair. There's Pat sitting in the hall on her scooter. We wheel up together, and I say, we're talking about what happened last night, and all of a sudden we hear this high-pitched voice from the end of the hall. There he is! We both turn around. Here comes Macy walking down the hall with her physical therapist. She's got this beaming smile on her face. Her physical therapist looks absolutely blown away, like, what happened here? And she goes, there he is. The power of Christ done come through Doug, and I can walk again today. The ribbon on the story is that as Macy continued to get better, I continued to get better. On the day that I left the hospital to go home, Macy also left the hospital to go home. Let me be the first to say I take no credit for Macy's healing. Her own faith, her own devotion did the trick. I was just called upon to facilitate that. I do not believe that I am special or uniquely talented. I believe these abilities are in all of us, and you don't have to get paralyzed from the neck down in order to discover them. In fact, I recommend that you do not. I will say that these experiences totally changed my life and my work. For the last 13 years, I've spent developing and refining my approach to this work. I've done hundreds of these sessions now. I've seen some remarkable results. I take no credit for any of it. As I often tell my clients, spirit does the work. We just show up for the meeting. Or for our purposes here, non-local consciousness does the work. We just show up for the meeting. All right, in the interest of brevity and respect for the time and the other speakers, I will close with these words from Shakespeare's Hamlet. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. My name is Doug Hayes. Blessings of peace, light, love, and perfect healing. Thank you. Namaste.
So now you get to hear an old friend of mine, and Laurel, Airica, in my living room, I don't know, 30 years ago, I said, you ought to do something with that wonderful gift you have for language. And 30 years later, you're going to hear Laurel, and now she's hooked up with Elizabeth Agnesse, who is a wonderful coloratura soprano. I hope I've got the right kind of soprano. And they will present you with word magic.
Is the mic on? It isn't. It is? You can hear me? Oh, good. Thank you so much. Thank you, Suzanne, for this opportunity to share what I have cultivated since we first got together, which is a discovery about all the secret spells of the English language. And I gained these insights into the language through Mother Nature's elemental energies. And everything I learned about the English language echoed and reflected me back to myself. So I'm going to briefly share with you an insight I was given into the essence of life when I went out for a walk looking for it. And I needed to find it rapidly because I was scheduled to present my discoveries the very next day. So this is a very true story and exactly how it happened. What is the essence of life, I asked. I need to find out fairly fast, and I'd like it to be in rhyming verse. Profound, definitive, yet terse. The essence of life, the angel said, is to live while you're living and after you're dead, for there's never a time when you'll cease to exist. So it's best to say yes and not try to resist. Well, I told them, I know perfectly well life is not evanescent, but you've given its purpose. I asked for life's essence. So I walked to the ocean to speak with the sea. We communicate with high frequency. I posed the question, and here's what she gave. The essence of life is a friendly wave. Like sea and sand, it's waves and particles. Just as I'd read in those technical articles, but hardly the basis for eloquent poetry. So I was relieved to recall that I know a tree who gives me leaves for my writings abundantly. Surely, he'd answer me more fundamentally. He nodded and bowed, whispered that he'd be proud to assist me in knowing my reason for being, but said, you're not a bit metaphysically fit, for the answers are everywhere. You're just not seeing. The purpose of life is the same as its essence. Whatever you do, try to be in the presence, for the prize isn't won by the joyless and dutiful, and life won't become fun till you choose to be you to full.
Be beautiful with spacious heart, with mind that's touched by grace. majesty. Step forth and take your place. America, America needs all of us to be courageous souls with noble goals to keep our country free. Now, watch the Tibetan singing bouncing ball. And join us. And join us for singing America, America.
Good.
Beautiful. Okay. Beautiful with spacious heart, with mind that's touched by grace, with simple human majesty. Step forth and take your place. America, America needs all of us to be courageous souls with noble goals to set our country free. Bravi, bravi, thank you.
So, the end of session 1. And thank you very much, girls.